3 minutes after 10 is the time. Hello. I don't know how we do this. I don't know if I want to do this, but all right, just bear with, okay? A bit of stream of consciousness. Well, it's always stream of consciousness, but let me talk to you briefly about where some of the inspiration is coming from. So let's begin with a tweet off a mate, with a message off a mate last night. Just sort of things to think about, things that might make you think. You're probably well aware of this already, mate, but we were just taken off a flight from Porto because the British end was unable to handle a scheduled inbound flight full mainly of Brits from our oldest global ally. The couple next to us with a baby had been trying to get via London to Dubai for 2 days, and then he uses some rather Anglo-Saxon language and wonders whether I'm aware of the extent of the problem because of the job that I do for a living. So you have a little look at flights. Cancellations. BA cancelled 10,000, I think, yesterday out of Heathrow in the coming months. Gatwick yesterday announced that everything's going to be getting back to normal, and 10 minutes later announced the cancellation, I think, of 26 flights because so many air traffic control people were off sick. So staff shortages continue to impact upon that sector. Then you've got the front page of the City AM newspaper, which is, I mean, it literally describes itself on the masthead as London's business newspaper. It's quite good these days. It used to be an absolute skipfire. I forget the name of the bloke that used to edit it, but he was a hardcore Brexiter. Imagine being a financial journalist and being pro-Brexit. It speaks of an ignorance on a level that would probably get you a job in the cabinet. So the front page of City AM today is bad news. This is it. They've just put bad news in 4-inch high big black letters. Bad news, pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. And then good news, Crossrail to fully open in November, which is relatively good news if you're a commuter working in London. That's not a joke. That is it. I think they may have nicked the idea off us. I don't know if you remember last week, we announced that we were going to start the programme every day with some good news. And by the second day of the scheme, of the plan, we couldn't find any. So we had to drop the feature even before it had begun. But that's City AM, London's business newspaper. Bad news, pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Good news, Crossrail 2 fully open in November. And then, because I work very hard on your behalf, as we have discussed recently, putting in proper sort of coal miner style shifts for you on a daily basis, I also consult, when I can, some foreign media. In fact, I get sent links to relevant stories by my brilliant listeners and some of my now in excess of 1 million Twitter followers. So this is from France's, I think it's a newspaper of record, Le Monde. I don't know whether this is relevant, but it all seems to me to speak to a similar theme. You go to the editorial of Le Monde published just yesterday, and there's a link. You can just press read in English. Did you know that? To read the editorials of one of the best-selling newspapers in France, just press a button, you can read it all in English. I shouldn't have told you that, should I? I should have pretended I was translating it on site from the original. So the headline is, the UK's downturn is a warning for Europe. The focus on ideology over pragmatism in response to the worst crisis in the country since the 1970s risks aggravating the deteriorating situation left by Boris Johnson and feeding the temptation to deploy anti-European and nationalist rhetoric. I'll read you a little bit more, actually, because, God won't... I get it wrong every day. God grant, no, won't the gifty gears to see ourselves as others see us, as the great Scottish bard almost wrote. In the absence of economic shock buffers, the United Kingdom's population is often more affected by financial crises than elsewhere on the European continent. And I guess the economic shock buffers that we lack are consequences probably of 12 years of Tory rule and the tyranny of these ludicrous self-styled think tanks that refuse to tell us who funds them but pop up all over the telly all the time telling us that we should be doing even more to help businesses make even more money while not introducing things like a £15 an hour minimum wage. Anyway, the economic and social storm that is brewing across the Channel confirms this observation. That phrase there, just look at it. The economic and social storm that is brewing across the Channel confirms this observation. The British are enduring the worst price increases of the G7 countries. The cost of food is soaring, while the cost of energy will have almost tripled in 1 year. Add in the damage of Brexit and COVID-19, and the UK threatens to regress to looking like an emerging market, said the Danish bank Saxo. The leaders of the National Health Service have even come out of their shells to warn about the risk of a humanitarian crisis linked to the impoverishment of the population. There it is. French newspaper reporting on this country, and probably paying more attention to what the Danish bank has said about our economy and what the leaders of our National Health Service have said about the state of the national health than most of the right-wing media. The leaders of the National Health Service have even come out of their shells to warn about the risk of a humanitarian crisis linked to the impoverishment of the population. Where do you start with this? Barristers, of course, are on strike. Young criminal barristers are planning to quit over poor pay because this government doesn't really like the rule of law. It doesn't really like this brand of Brexity conservatism, has to continue to deny reality for reasons I don't need to explain to you anymore. Liz Truss today refusing to confirm that she will actually have an ethics advisor, because we all saw what can happen to a prime minister when you have an ethics advisor. You have to sack them or you have to watch them resign when it emerges that you have actually not got any ethics. So she's cutting out the middleman and going straight for the ethics-free administration. And of course, the system of justice, the very essence of democracy is our judicial system, and the poorest people in the country are not going to have access to it if things continue as they are, which I suspect people like Dominic Raab would welcome. I often wonder with Dominic Raab, because he trained as a lawyer. As far as I can tell, his legal career didn't go terribly well. And I think he has dedicated his political career to wreaking revenge on the legal profession. I think what you have there is a petulant little failed lawyer who didn't get the big contracts or the big jobs that he was expecting, and therefore has dedicated most of his political life to, well, on the one hand being a plum of epic proportions, and on the other hand trying to get his revenge on all those lawyers who actually are good at the job, even the ones that are working for relative pittances, because they at least are doing what they set out to do. Pubs. Last orders as 7 in 10 pubs warn that they will not survive the winter. This is pubs being driven towards extinction by soaring energy bills. As many as 7 in 10 saying that they will not survive the winter. It might seem trivial. We can live without a pub. What about care workers? Epic problems in the care sector now with staff shortages. Supermarkets now paying more than care workers receive. Almost 400,000 care workers are earning less than supermarket workers as a staffing crisis engulfs the sector. That's from the King's Fund. NHS, A&E, you've read about the ambulance pauses. You've read about delays, rather. You've read about the delays in A&E. You've probably been to a hospital and done a double take at the poster on the wall about how long it's going to take you to be seen. 4 hours for an illness, 8 hours for an injury, or was it the other way around? 8 hours for an illness, 4 hours for an injury on a A&E department that I was in the last 2 weeks. Schools with roofs falling in, and I don't know what to do. Really, I don't. I mean, we come on air every day, and I noticed probably last week, or certainly last month, at the beginning of this month, I just began to notice that we were getting a bit Groundhog Day. All that changes is the sector. What are we going to talk about today? Are we going to talk about what's happening in the pub sector? How bad is it? And then my phones ring off the hook with people telling me that they're facing imminent oblivion. What's happening in the care home sector? And then people ring me from the care home sector and tell me that they're facing imminent oblivion. People running businesses which have energy bills to pay, looking at the projected payments that they're going to be expected to take, looking also at continuing staff shortages. The hospitality sector, we've done that recently, haven't we? Yes, we have. We've done the hospitality sector, people ringing us to tell us they're facing existential threat. All before the energy price hikes kick in the coming months. I mean, I'm not joking when I say, where would you point for something that's going well? I imagine bailiffs are having a good time of it at the moment. I don't know. Where would you go to find something going well? And Dave's already complaining. And you're right, actually. That's just not right, James. Living without a pub is a life not worth living. I remain a huge fan of pubs. I hate these stories about pubs closing, but I recognise that in the great scheme of things, care homes are more important. in many ways, most ways, always. So, I mean, listen, if you're a racist, then obviously me reading from a French newspaper will have set fire to your hair already this morning. So come back to London and have a look at the front page of City AM, okay? Bad news, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. And then, you know, the Mail now having some sort of weird hissy fit about the disgusting Rwandan scheme, which everybody with a functioning brain could have told you, and in fact did tell you from the very start, was doomed to fail because it's not designed to solve a problem. It's designed to delight nasty people. And then perhaps the weirdest little petri dish of punditry that this country has ever endured now would be the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph newspaper. And you know it pains me to say this because it's my late father's newspaper, and it was it was the paper of record. It was a magnificent newspaper for most of the time that my dad worked on it, under the legendary newspaper editor Sir Bill Deeds. But just think for a minute. If you listen, I mean this, all the racists who hated me reading out from a French newspaper, this is the Daily Telegraph. This is the newspaper that is to Boris Johnson as the Beano is to Dennis the Menace. Okay? They are inextricably intertwined. And you have a comment writer here, the main comment piece, the main op-ed in the Daily Telegraph. Britain is broken and nobody can be bothered to do anything about it. This is the ideological home of the people who have spent 12 years telling you that the right people are in charge. This is the ideological home of the people who told you that David Cameron would be a most excellent Prime Minister. But then they told you that Brexit would be a most excellent idea, and therefore Theresa May, once Boris Johnson had dropped out of the race, would be a most excellent Prime Minister. And then they told you that Theresa May was an awful Prime Minister and that she must be replaced by Boris Johnson. So she was replaced by Boris Johnson, and they continued to tell you that these were the perfect people to run the country and the perfect policies to pursue. Most obviously, Brexit and austerity from those three prime ministers, from Cameron, May and Johnson. You'd go for Brexit and austerity. Those were the perfect policies for these people to pursue, and absolutely the right people were in power. It's almost as if the needle has jumped on the record. They go, the right people are in power and we are pursuing the perfect policies. The right people are in power and we are pursuing the perfect policies. The right people are in power and we're pursuing the perfect policies. Needle jump. Britain is broken and nobody can fix it. How dare they? I mean, seriously. How dare right-wing newspapers? City AM, I know it's got a different editor, but they have spent 12 years telling us that austerity is good and Brexit is good. And now the consequences of putting these political numpties in charge are coming home to roost. It's incredible. Come on. Oh, come on, James. Stop being so doomster gloomster. Jacob Rees-Mogg has said that some of his city friends are doing quite well. I mean, what do we do? How does it work? I mean, genuinely, you've got the Daily Telegraph comment pages literally stating Britain is broken and nobody can be bothered to fix it. And here we are. What are we going to talk about? Death trap dinghies again? I mean, is that what they're going to throw to you in the hope of distracting you from the situation that is unfolding on your high streets, in your homes, in your businesses, in your hospitals, in your care homes? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. Here's a good one. Here, I'm sick to death of James O'Brien and his negativity. Well, give me a ring and tell me what to be positive about then, chum. Seriously. Get someone to teach you how to use a phone and give me a call. It's quite incredible. And it's not coming from The Guardian or the Daily Mirror or from me. Shielding families, front of the Financial Times, shielding families from fuel bill shock, reckoned to cost £100 billion. And what did the Daily Mail have on its front page last week? A story about £1 million, which is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the figure on the front page of the Financial Times, being spent on some training schemes in the NHS. We are, I think, close to becoming a failed state. I really do. And I bloody live here. This is the only country I've ever wanted to live in. It's the only country I've ever lived in. It's where I am raising my family. It's where I love to live. And I'm insulated from a lot of these problems. But it honestly feels as if we are heading towards another cliff edge while everybody, or many, many people, are pretending that it's going brilliantly. I don't get it. I guess the question then is, do you? Do you get it? Can you make sense of this for me? Because Every now and then, I told you when I got back from my last holiday, I know what you're thinking. It sounds like one of those days where he's not going to take any calls at all. Just when you think the monologue is coming to an end, he goes off on an entirely different tangent. And you know what? You're right. I told you when I got back from my last holiday, which is, again, evidence of how insulated I am from a lot of the problems that you might be facing. I still have foreign holidays. And I talked about cogs and how if you do this for a living, you're a cog in the machine, even if you don't realise it. When I turn, something else turns. Daily Mail once reported on a decline in the number of people following me on Twitter after Elon Musk had announced he was going to buy the company. You are a cog in the wheel, whether you want to be or not. And I got back from holiday and I somehow felt as if the cog had come out. Yeah, Tony Dickin, that Daily Express journalists are going on strike. Daily Express journalists ordered by their bosses to write about how strikers are militant saboteurs who are bringing this country to its knees are having to go on strike themselves to get a decent wage. Ho-hum. And you get the cog out of the machine. And it gives you a perspective. You can see what's going on. And it's just hideous. But there's a sense of denial. There's a sense of delusion, perhaps. A sense of, I don't know what it is. But I know that when the worst right-wing opinion merchants in the country start talking after 12 years of telling us, of 12 years of getting their own way, of getting their own people into positions of power, of getting their own poverty producing policies pushed across the line, getting austerity pushed across the line, getting Brexit pushed across the line. When they start talking about Britain being broken and our closest geographical ally, France, is looking over the channel with a sense of utter bewilderment and fear because they worry that this might presage problems for other countries as well, then I don't get it. Do you? 0345 6060 973. I hate this question. I hate it. But I've got to ask it today. How bad is everything? 0345 6060 973. Do you know what Liz Truss was talking about last night at yet another flipping hustings? How she would be perfectly prepared to press the nuclear button because she thinks it's a very important part of the Prime Minister's duties. Sorry? What? Pardon? How bad is it? Convince me that it isn't. Don't send me texts complaining about the truth. Seriously, you've been doing that ever since you voted for Brexit. Just tell me what you're cheerful about. Tell me what there is about a country where everything from a hospital to your local pub is facing existential threat that is worth celebrating. And then look me in the eye and tell me how the hell the people who've spent 12 years telling us to put him in charge, put her in charge, put him in charge, pursue this policy, pursue that policy, pursue this policy, are now turning around, clutching their pearls, throwing their hands in the air and going, oh, tatty-filarious, everything is broken and nobody's prepared to fix it. It's beyond pathetic. It's actually tragic. Except perhaps it isn't. 0345 6060 973. Here you go. What's going on? What's going on? How did it happen? It's 10:21. I do apologise. That's excessive even by my standards. 23 minutes after 10. More in hope than expectation. Just tell me why City AM, the Daily Telegraph and Le Monde are wrong and this country isn't broken. 0345 6060 973. I mean that most sincerely, folks. But then, to be a little bit more specific on the call to arms this morning, although the phones are ringing off the hook, it might be people concerned about my health rather than people actually seeking to contribute to the programme. The area that you're in, I mean professionally speaking or personally, and the question of, is it worse than it has ever been? 0345, give me the evidence, give me the proof that it is or it isn't. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Because, I mean, you fight it. I told you I could talk uninterrupted right through till Sheila Fogarty gets here today. Because I feel like a dam has burst. I've been holding back from doing this topic. I have variations on it. We have conversations in the morning before the show. Should we do it? Is everything broken? Is it as bad as it feels? I mean, how can it be? And the breaking point comes when you realise you're having the same verbal exercises with completely different topics. Every topic has become the same. Every topic. You want to talk about hospitals? Well, just how bad is it? You want to talk about schools? Well, just how bad is it? You want to talk about care homes? Well, just how bad is it? You want to talk about pubs? Well, just how bad is it? You want to talk about restaurants? Well, just how bad is it? Everything that affects us. You want to talk about energy bills? Well, just how bad are they? You want to talk about water? Well, just how bad is it? You want to talk about sewage? Well, just how bad is that? Do you see what I mean? Every topic you pick, essentially, speaks to the question of just how bad is it. And I have a sense that perhaps, I mean, in my own case, I don't think it's cowardice. It's more not wanting to address it, actually, because I'm frightened of what I'll find. But I'm addressing it today, which means I should probably start taking some calls. Tony's in Camden to kick things off. Tony, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James.
Have you got any jokes, mate? I could do a cheering up as it goes. Go on.
No, unfortunately not. No, I'm very much doom and gloom. I'm quite worried about things. It's, you try and stay positive, but it does feel like things aren't broken.
Give me the detail. Give me the evidence. What are you going to point out for me today?
So I was just telling your researcher that speaking to my landlord yesterday, he's a doctor. And I said to him, it's the problem with the energy bills going up. No one seems to be mentioning how that affects hospitals and schools and things, and I presume that comes out of your budget, and there must be a big problem with that. And he said, absolutely. But he said, that is very worrying. He said, like, people leaving lights on, running taps and stuff. We're really conscious of this stuff all the time now. But
hospitals, we'll get on to staffing next, but hospitals don't have their energy bills capped, I don't think. I think it is only personal domestic energy bills that are capped. So the stories we're hearing from businesses, and everyone will think of the fish and chip shop in Southend, but that was just one tiny example, tiny tip of an enormous iceberg, seeing the bills go up by multiples of 7 or 8 or even 1,000% going up by 10 times. Imagine what happens if that hits a hospital or a school?
Yeah. I mean, I think the small businesses are going to be the worst, because I don't imagine they'll get any protection. But I don't know how there's something. There have to be extra special measures for hospitals and schools,
and then staffing.
Ignore it. So the staffing, So he said that people are leaving in droves. That's their biggest issue.
Where are they going? Do we know, Tony?
Well, some of them are going to better paid jobs.
Yeah.
And some of them are leaving to come back to do agency work.
Which costs the NHS more than it does to have them on the payroll.
More. Yeah, it costs more. It's better paid for them. They get to pick the better shifts. So the staff who are left behind, the morale drops even more. It's kind of a vicious circle. It just sounds terrible. It's very, very worrying. Very worrying.
Thank you. 27 minutes. How old are you?
I'm 53.
53. Have you ever felt like this before?
No, it's just been getting worse and worse since.
Since the people who are telling us the country is broken started getting everything their own way, with their people they wanted in Downing Street and the policies they wanted inflicted upon the country. Cameron, May, Johnson, and now Truss. Austerity, Brexit, tax cuts, they're getting everything they wanted, and now they're complaining about everything being broken. The world, I just think, has gone a bit wrong. Leslie's in Glasgow. Leslie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I'm a first-time caller. My mum put me on to you last year, and I've listened to you constantly since then.
Fantastic. I like that. The younger generation, Leslie. I'm so happy to have you on board.
Hold on. I'm older than you.
I thought you might be. I was teasing. Thank you. Better late than never, and thanks to your mum.
No worries. What I wanted to say is, when it really made me call in was when somebody called you negative. You're not negative. You're not negative at all, because I'm a really positive person. But I'll tell you, James, I'm 54 years old. I've lived through Thatcher. I've seen lots of horrible things happen in the country, and I have never, ever been so frightened to live in my own country. I had the chance to immigrate to Australia about 12 years ago, and I only wish to God I'd done it. But I stayed because I loved the UK. But I wish I had gone, because the country's going down the pan, and you're only telling the truth. And I can't, for the life of me, understand why people can't waken up and see it.
Energy crisis. I mean, just random headlines now. And I lean towards the right-wing newspapers, because then at least, stupid people are not going to be able to claim that they're biased or that it's fake news. Energy crisis could last 3 years, says National Grid. There's another one. NHS 111 chaos will cause avoidable harm. There's another one. I mean, everywhere you go.
It's so frightening, James. And the thing is, denying it's happening will only fuel this current government to keep going. The people need to totally waken up, totally fight this. I don't mean fight as in literally fight. They need to stand up and say enough really is enough. I mean, it is. This country is going, there's no need, this isn't happening in other European countries. We are getting hit worse than anywhere else. And this country, collectively, whether I've got a Scottish voice or not, collectively, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, we need to stand together.
Well,
Government.
I'm not going to argue with you, but I don't know what that means. I don't think you do either, and I'm not sure Keir Starmer does. That Le Monde article ends by pointing out that the Labour Party at the moment is not offering up any meaningful response to the jeopardy that the country appears to be in. Leslie, thank you, and thank you for your kind words. I am actually a pretty positive person as well, even when we're talking about bleak stuff. We managed to get a few shafts of sunlight into proceedings, but I mean, what do you do in a situation like this? Where do you turn? What does the light at the end of the tunnel even look like? 10:31 is the time. Inevitable, perhaps, since that referendum result in 2016. Inevitable, almost certainly, since that appalling Hobson's choice of a general election in 2019. A choice between a rock and a hard place for the British electorate. But, of course, it was obvious that Johnson was going to win, and he was going to win by miles because he was much better at selling himself, his rancid personality, to a supine population. But that's where it's brought us. And now the people that sold it to us are complaining about what's happened. I don't know how you unpick that, unravel it, or reverse it. It's 10:31. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines. It's 10:34. I've got 10, 12, 25 topics going on in my head. That's the problem at the moment. And they all dance around the same question. But I need to zone in on the specifics. I will do shortly. I'm not doing it yet. I'm doing a general question about the state of the nation and how bad is it? 0345 6060 973. Thank you to Andy, who says, James, you're a positive person talking about negative subjects. I'd say you're rather like a counsellor for the nation, a cathartic beacon in a sea of sewage. But, you know, it's self-protection as well sometimes. I always remember, I've mentioned it to you quite a few times when we were talking, I think, about sepsis. And an older lady listener rang in or texted in to say, I've got an operation next week and you're scaring me. And it's always stayed with me, that little observation. You think, I've got to tell you the truth, especially when other people aren't, even if it doesn't make me popular in the short term. Some people didn't like me much during the Brexit aftermath, but they all love me now. I get sort of reams of letters of apology from those people every day. I may be employing a little bit of sarcasm at this point in proceedings. But I want to tell you the truth, but I don't want to scare you. I don't want to scare myself, you know. But you tell me what I've said this morning so far that's wrong. When I list those sectors where people are reporting things they've never seen before. Here's another one. I spoke with the school this morning. Their bills are jumping by 600% next month. They're planning on running a generator for the next 8 months as it's cheaper than buying power from the grid. I don't know. I take most texts into the programme in good faith. You know, sometimes I can't tell the difference between something really, really stupid and parody or comedy or people yanking my chain. But I don't quite understand the disconnect between the Conservative Party leadership campaign, most obviously, and the country that the rest of us seem to inhabit. I don't get it. So we'll continue with the State of the Nation conversation. But then we'll nudge it into specifics, like the sector you're in and the threat that you face or the reality that you are currently enduring. And I wish that, I mean, I've given up now. But if you're one of the people who's got what they wanted, what's really bemusing, says Joe, was listening to callers to Ben Kentish on Monday afternoon, ringing in to defend Boris Johnson. Why can't they see what he's done? We'll do that as a topic one day, but we'll be doing it from the outside. Because I guess sometimes, you know, if you backed this stuff, you voted for this stuff, you thought Brexit would be a good idea, you liked austerity, you were pro-Cameron, you kicked Ed Miliband into touch, you all of those things, Brexit, austerity, a Conservative Prime Minister after Conservative Prime Minister after Conservative Prime Minister, and now another Conservative Prime. I don't know how you do it. How do you cling on to the idea that you're on the winning side or that you're on the right side when even your own cheerleaders in newspapers like the Daily Telegraph are describing the country as being broken? They won't take any responsibility for it. I'll tell you who the poster boy is for the malaise that we're discussing. Can you guess who it is? It's Michael Gove. Michael Gove has let it be known that he thinks his career in frontline politics is over. So he's going to slime back onto Rupert Murdoch's payroll, it has been suggested. Imagine that. Michael Gove, the man who brought Dominic Cummings into government, the man who brought Brexit into the realms of respectability, briefly, the man who was cheerleading for Boris Johnson's first leadership campaign until he suddenly decided that he couldn't in good conscience put such a depraved individual into Downing Street. So he pulled out of that leadership campaign only to pop up a few years later in Boris Johnson's cabinet. A man so utterly devoid of what anybody might even loosely describe as integrity or consistency that he'll fit right in on Rupert Murdoch's payroll, of course, just like he did before when he went to America to interview Donald Trump without telling anybody that Rupert Murdoch sat in the actual room watching it. Fearless speaking truth to power. He's the poster boy, isn't he? Gove. Imagine that. Imagine having set fire to the blue touch paper of Britain and then deciding, well, I don't think that any of these new lot will put me in their cabinet, so I'm walking away from frontline government. Look at what you've done, man. Seriously. Just look over your shoulder as you walk back into Rupert Murdoch's payroll. Unbelievable. You brought Dominic Cummings into government and you put Boris Johnson in Downing Street, all off the back of your ludicrous Brexit fever dream. And now you get a cushy job back on Fleet Street. Chris is in Colchester. Chris, it's all on you, mate. Cheer us up.
Hi, James. How are you?
Well, I'm all right. I'm troubled and a little bit angry, actually. But that's not what you phoned in to find out. What would you like to say?
Right. Just listening to you in the last few moments, you said about being truthful, and that has 100% to do with a lot of things. Okay. I'll firstly say I'm not perfect, but honesty is the best policy. Now, a lot of people don't want to hear the truth of what's happening. And because, the country is so disjointed, should I say, prices...
Divided, not disjointed, divided. It's riven down the middle, isn't it?
Well, yes, but we could say divided, disjointed, but it is. One is because people want more than what they need, okay? Now, if we were to say, for example, and I'm just going to go on, for me, when I've joined the health service 40 years ago, I went out on strike. Certain people couldn't strike. And I thought people need to up the wages simply because if you care for people, that's surely got to be the most important thing in life.
You would think so, but we live under market forces. Let me nudge you towards the here and now, Chris. How bad are things given your... the broad sweep of your life experience, looking today at anything from the health service to the hospitality sector to Downing Street? How bad do you think things are?
Well, I think things are broken for the majority of people. I think there's a proportion of people who don't really get it. As I say, I've been in the health service. I've played professional football. I'm now in emergency services, and my head is just above water. Now, I've had to rebuild because I was married, and then obviously I had to buy a new property.
Right.
But it's trying to give something for my children. Now, the way things are going, everything's going to be wiped out because I've got to then pay inheritance tax, or my children will have to pay inheritance tax.
Well,
I've still got funeral
it depends how big your estate is, of course. But we're getting a bit distracted by the weeds of it. What's the threshold for inheritance tax at the moment?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that.
Well, I think I get some quite good news when you look it up, Chris. If you are struggling to keep your head above water at the moment, I think you're probably going to be pretty safe from inheritance tax. But of course, it's more of the red meat that gets lobbed at people when the government is trying to pretend that the real threat is coming from the left, or the real threat is coming from people who favour a little bit of wealth redistribution. Britain is broken. Britain is broken. Daily Telegraph op-ed headline. How could you lay that page out as a sub-editor? How could you clear it as the editor of the Daily Telegraph? Well, the country has done exactly what we've been calling for it to have done to it for the last 12 years. From the minute David Cameron walked into Downing Street, we've had pretty much everything our own way. And that's how you're describing it now. That's the real problem, I think, is the The delusion, the continuing delusion, and the Michael Gove factor, the denial, the fact that Michael Gove is still treated as an honest broker, a respectable figure. An article in one newspaper about, well, we shall really miss politicians of Michael Gove's calibre. It's crackers. You miss politicians of Michael Gove's calibre? Look at what's happened to the education system. Look at what... Oh, boy. Siama is in Bradford. Siama, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I'm a solicitor in Bradford.
Yes.
And I just want to talk about the effects the barrister strikes have had on our sector.
Yes.
We're currently finding that we already had a huge backlog from the pandemic. I don't know whether you know the courts were closed for quite some time.
Of course. And there was a very, very long backlog in place before the pandemic as well. I think it's important to bear that in mind before people in government try to pretend that it wasn't already in disarray before the unforeseeable pandemic came along.
Yes, absolutely. So what's happening now is, because of the strikes, we are not able to bill any cases because the cases are getting moved, they're getting adjourned. We're not allowed, we're not able to get any barristers on any new cases. So effectively, any new cases we're getting are held in limbo. We are waiting for barristers to take new instructions.
6,235 Crown Court cases were disrupted, including 1,415 trials in the first 19 days of the strike. And Dominic Raab is still trying to demonise barristers.
Yes, absolutely. So there is a problem, and barristers have been on strike for over 2 months now. I'm finding it difficult to instruct barristers.
Well, it's going to get harder. Do you know how many left last year? How many junior barristers left last year?
I can't remember the numbers.
300.
I think it's in
300.
Yeah.
40% of the most junior barristers walked away from criminal work over the past 5 years. Almost half of them are walking away, and Dominic Raab is insisting that they should stop complaining about their terms and conditions. It's I don't know what word to use anymore, Siama.
Well, I can tell you this, James. The pay is absolutely appalling.
I know.
And it has been for some time. And this is not something that they've raised now. It's something that's been raised with the government for quite some time. Yeah. And they've turned a blind eye like they do with everything else. So they acknowledge there is a problem, but they won't deal with the problem. Now, it's having a ripple effect on us because we've financially been affected because we can't claim for any of our cases, any monies for our cases, because they're not being concluded. So the legal aid agency won't pay us until the cases are concluded, and the cases are not getting concluded. So as a result, we're having to bear the financial impact of the strike as well.
And that kicks down into every aspect of your life. So you've not only got the criminal justice system grinding to a halt with all of the ramifications, the obvious ramifications that has both for victims of crime, for people accused of crime, whether wrongly or rightly, justice itself must be seen to be served. That is literally grinding to a halt. And the people charged with providing it are walking away from the profession in their droves while being insulted by the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab. It is, I mean, you see what I mean? Because I know this is your world. The law is your world. My world is talking to people like you. Do you see what I mean when I say every topic is the same now? You've picked the law. Well, we could be talking about hospitality. We could be talking about social care. We could be talking about the health service. The conversation would be more or less the same. It's just the subject headings that would change.
Well, James, this is the first time I've listened to your show.
What?
And it's the first time I've ever called into a radio show.
Because of a sense of imminent emergency.
Yes. But I can tell you, I absolutely agree with whatever you've said. In fact, you've probably understated the problem. We haven't felt the actual impact of all these, the energy crisis and the other crisis that's going to happen. And I think it's going to be far worse than we anticipate. And I'm saying that because in our sector, we're already having to let go a lot of staff because of the fact that we're not getting the finances in from the legal aid agency because of the strike. So there are a number of people that I know, solicitors, that have had to close shop and move on to a different area. So I don't think, I think in the next maybe 3 to 6 months, we are going to feel the full impact of the crisis we're in.
And you have to sit here, and I know you do as well, and say, oh, I hope you're wrong. Oh, I hope not. But at some point, and for me, I think that point was probably at about 2 minutes to 10 this morning, at some point you have to say to yourself, no, it's all very well not wanting bad things to happen, but you can't ignore the possibility that they are going to. And as Siama suggests, I mean, where is the line between possibility and inevitability? That's really what we're talking about today. It is 10 minutes to 11. I mean, crikey, I can't expect you to do my job for me, but tell me that this isn't true, okay? Pick a sector, and then the question that springs most immediately to mind is, has it ever been as bad as this before? And the answer is almost always no. So you pick a sector, or you tell me whether or not you share my fear, my profound misgivings that the Conservative leadership election, the quest to find a new Prime Minister, strikes me as the band playing on the Titanic after the iceberg had been. Have we already hit the iceberg, or can we change course now? There you go, Keith, 10:51, and I finally got to the question that lies at the heart of this morning's meanderings. Is that a new record? Have we already hit the iceberg? 0345 6060 973. Claire's in Northwich. Claire, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Okay, I'm glad for this opportunity to give my opinion, because I hate everything of this country. Every morning I have a doom scroll. Every day I have a doom scroll on Twitter, and it makes me so angry. Everything that you've mentioned, they're wanting to pull us out of the ECHR, Partygate, the NHS, education, police cuts, energy prices, cost of living, P&O, Rwanda, everything just makes me livid. And
P&O briefly made the government livid, didn't it? They were briefly furious about the way the workers at P&O were treated, but now they're trying to make it illegal for railway workers to protect themselves from similar treatment.
It's just outrageous, and it's just got me to such a point. I'm married to an Italian man, and we live here, obviously, but I'm now learning Italian because I can get citizenship there and leave this plague island behind. It just incenses me. And we can't seem to do anything. There's the odd protest here and there, but mine is what appears to be a lone voice.
Well, it's not, though, is it? And now I think we have to mention Keir Starmer, don't we? You feel completely unrepresented.
Yes. Exactly.
And that's his fault. He is the leader of the opposition. We might speak about the Liberal Democrats or the Green Party, but the bottom line is the leader of the opposition is not reassuring you, comforting you, or speaking for you, in your opinion.
No, exactly. I know, and I did have high hopes for him, and at the beginning, but it's just sort of like fizzled out, and now we're like, lost sheep in the wilderness, thinking, well, who's going to, lead us to, to rejoin the EU and get this country better?
The Conservatives' plan is to carry on feeding the base that they consider will be big enough to keep them in power. Give me some specifics from your life rather than the broader picture, if you could, Claire. I bridle when people say they hate the country, because what you mean is you hate what's going on in the country. But where does it hit you? Where does it hurt you? Where does it worry you specifically?
Well, just I had friends, had this debate in the past, and now, well, maybe it's my fault. I don't know. I don't speak to them anymore because I think I'd doing me doom scrolls every day. That's enough. But now I just don't bother with people because they drag me down and make me angry, make me livid. I've got T-shirts with things written on that's my little protest.
Your little outlet. No, well, you've all got to find them. Not everyone has the privilege of a platform like this one. Thank you, Claire. Take care. That's the point, isn't it? The idea that I think I'm sticking with the iceberg analogy, actually. Just this sense that we've already hit it. Sunak and Truss are playing violins on the poop deck. We've probably already hit it. And they're arguing over deck chairs. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. In the next hour, and I'll start nudging you toward this now, because I don't think you want another 24-minute monologue at the top of the second hour of the programme. So in the next hour, it's where you work that we nudge ourselves towards? Where the sector that you work in. So pubs, 7 in 10 facing imminent closure. The criminal justice system, as Syama has already illustrated, grinding to an actual halt because Dominic Raab is still furious that the legal profession failed to recognise what a genius he is and sent him packing all those years ago. So from pubs to courtrooms. This is I'm trying not to use that word, actually. It's been pointed out to me that it has mental health connotations, but goodness knows what other word I can use. It's just, I need to come up with one. But the gulf between the examples I cite, if I say from pubs to courtrooms, it's not like saying from pubs to restaurants. It's from pubs to courtrooms. It's from care homes to haulage companies. It's from hospitals to sandwich shops. It's whatever word I'm going to come up with, so I stop saying bonkers so much on the radio. 10:56 is the time. Jennifer is in Peterborough. Jennifer, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello, Jennifer.
So lovely to speak to you and everything. I'm not anyone like special or anything like that.
Yes, you are.
I'm just
No, you are. You are. Of course you are.
But I just wanted to come at it from kind of a personal mental health point of view.
Yes.
So if I waffle, please just tell me to shush.
As long as you do the same to me.
So I fought anorexia. I was in hospital 8 months, fought my way out of that.
Well done.
Thank you. Over the past, since COVID started, I've had about 120 hours of dental surgery. So that I'm fighting that.
Right.
But at the moment, I just feel exhausted, really, because I know what I was fighting for when I was fighting for my life, my weight, when I was in hospital, because there's an end goal. Whereas now it feels like I'm fighting. I've got one salary at the end of the day that lasts me a month. That doesn't change, whereas everything's going up. So it's a bit like I've lost I can't see the end goal, and that's what's scaring me, because I don't know what I'm fighting for. This is one thing. I work all the hours that I can, but I can't take a time off when I've had surgery, so I'm working through that as well because I can't afford it. But with everything going up, I can't see the wood for the trees. And
your experience is going to be commonplace, and yet I don't think you feel very represented or seen, probably, at the moment.
It's a bit like, I say in inverted commas, kind of normal person. I'm 36. I don't have children. I don't have any dependents. And yet, where do I go? If I've got bills coming on my doorstep and I physically do not have that money, what do I do?
I don't know.
And even when I came out of hospital, there wasn't, everything's in the community. But this was a couple of years ago when I was in hospital. There was 12 beds covering for 5 counties. And it feels like it's a bit like that. Everyone's so overrun. Everyone's,
And the care homes are so short-staffed that they haven't got the beds to take the people from the hospitals, which, the bed blocking thing is off the scale. I wonder whether, because I feel this some mornings, when I think, I can't talk about that today, it's too dismal. I wonder whether newspapers are doing that now. Apart from these occasional outbreaks of almost accidental realisation when they write the newspapers that have essentially steered government for 12 years, write about how everything's broken. Maybe they think, well, we can't write about bed blocking again. We won't sell any papers.
Yeah, I guess it's like my mum always says to me, we focus on the positives, not the negatives.
Yes.
But
we try to.
I'm running out of positives as the days go on.
That's very nicely put. Has your mum got any?
My mum's just faffing around, just, doing as mothers do and everything. But, I try my best. And, I could write a list longer than most people about things to get me down.
I tell you, when you said you weren't special, you upset me a bit. I hate to hear stuff like that. But I know what you meant by it. You just meant...
You get like barristers and stuff like that calling. I'm just me.
Yeah, well, I'm just me, And the point is this, is that we feel we've played by the rules. We feel we've kept our end of the bargain. We feel that we put our shifts in and expect in return to, at the very least, to be able to keep our heads above water. Now, I can, but you're worried that you won't be able to anymore.
No, I mean, the only future I see is, the money's not there. The only thing I see is having to move back in with my parents, and I'm 36. I've fought, through everything that I have for what?
Yeah.
Because it's all been taken away from me. So.
And you will not be alone.
Sorry, I don't mean to depress you.
No, don't. You don't. You're here. We can smile while we chronicle the bad news. And unfortunately, I've got to make it worse for you. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Peterborough are at Kidderminster Harriers on Saturday, Jennifer. So that's not going to be good for Peterborough either.
You better have your best boots on. That's what I'm going to say.
Thank you. I've got to go. I'm late for everything at the moment. Honestly, it's 11 o'clock. It is 4 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we continue the conversation now, but we make it sector specific, if that doesn't all sound too management consultancy. Sector specific. So everywhere I look, and I share these thoughts with you most mornings, I see problems. Whichever headline you choose, supermarket pay exceeds carers' wages. Almost 400,000 care workers are earning less than supermarket workers. Couple that with a story from earlier in the week about the shortage of staff in care homes, meaning that patients can't be sent home from hospital to care homes, meaning that the bed in the hospital can't be freed up for somebody in need of it. So we call it bed blocking, don't we? So that's sector specific to both the NHS and social care. 237,000 of the lowest earning care workers would receive an immediate 6.3% pay increase plus benefits by going to work in a supermarket. I'm not making comparisons between the two about anything except wages. And then you turn the page and you come to this. Last orders as 7 in 10 pubs warn they will not survive the winter. This largely as a consequence of energy bills. 70% of pubs surveyed by the industry magazine, The Morning Advertiser, said they're going to go bust this winter without government support. This is a sector, of course, that got some help during lockdown, but which took a massive kicking over the course of the pandemic. Because even when they were allowed to open, we were a lot less likely to go to them. Young criminal barristers plan to quit over poor pay. This is more than half of junior barristers who are going to stop taking criminal defence work if ministers fail to deliver the pay rise that they're seeking. And the pay rise needs to be, they say, about 25% because of the appalling conditions they've been working in for the last 5 years. Oh, they're not that appalling, you might say. Well, then explain to me why 40%, 40% of the most junior barristers have walked out over that period, have literally turned their back on that branch of law. I don't know if you saw Robert Rinder, the Judge Rinder guy off the telly, presenting Good Morning Britain this week and delivering a passionate, heartfelt and detailed description of why this is so important. If the poorest people in the country don't have access to justice, we cease to be a democracy in any meaningful sense of the word. And then Sharon Graham, talking to Tom Swarbrick yesterday, gets picked up in the Times. Starmer is too embarrassed to support workers, says the General Secretary of Unite. So we mustn't leave Starmer off the hook this morning as well. But sector specific now. So teachers, what's going to happen to the energy bill? You're a head teacher. As I understand it, and I know there are different models with academy trusts and what have you, but as I understand it, your budget, you've got to find the money to pay your energy bills, which are, because unlike domestic energy services, they're not capped, they could go up by a multiple of 6, 7, 8 or more in the coming months. And you've got to find the money to pay for that in a school that is already struggling to make ends meet. Is that correct? 0345 60 973 is the number that you need. And you pick a sector. I mean, what have we just touched on? We've just touched on the law. We've just touched on social care. We've just touched on health. We've just touched on hospitality. We haven't even mentioned restaurants. We're talking about pubs and we're talking about energy bills. We haven't even mentioned staff shortages. What is the sector? I mean, what would you do? Undertakers and bailiffs, probably, are the only growth sectors in this country at the moment. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. And hedge funds, of course. Don't forget that the chief executive and running these companies for the benefit of shareholders and not customers or employees. Because they've had massive pay rises, as you know, over the course of the last year. I mean, genuinely massive. Dave is in Manchester. Dave, what have you got?
Hello, James. Yeah, I was just listening to your caller from Bradford, the solicitor, and I don't work it. I'm retired, but I can give you a synopsis across a broad range of occupations because I work as a sort of volunteer appropriate adult in the criminal justice system. So my role is to go into custody suites when a detained person is either a juvenile, so they need an adult to sit with them, or they're a vulnerable adult, so they've got health or learning difficulties. Right. But what I'm finding from what that solicitor said is that, they've got, the solicitors are telling me, I was there last night, asked to come at 5:45 for an adult with mental health issues, and the solicitor was saying that they are at their wits' end because their system is breaking down because they're on a rota system, an on-call system, a duty solicitor system, and then it's given to one firm, and they don't have enough people, and they're covering 5 or 6 police stations. They're working through day and night, and they're literally, the whole system is falling apart. I had to wait 2 hours last night for a duty solicitor to turn up because he'd been at 2 police stations previously.
Now, I'm imagining I'm a Conservative politician, okay, not a Conservative voter, but unfortunately there's going to be some bleeding of those two categories. And am I honestly now thinking to myself, listening to this, well, I'm not vulnerable or poor or suffering from poor mental health. Why should I care? I mean, is it that bleak and that simple?
It's that bleak, but also all the things that the Conservatives talk about at the moment, the education, health, police. Priti Patel, I saw something on her the other day that she's saying that it's ridiculous that we're bringing in 20,000 new police officers. Fine. Last night when I got into custody, there should be 4 sergeants in the custody suite. There was 1.
There you go.
And they couldn't get my prisoner out of the cell because I asked the sergeant, can you get him out, please? And he said, I can't. I've got 4 cases in front of you, that I've got, the clock in the prison in custody where a prisoner's got to be dealt with within 24 hours. He says, I'm trying to get hold of a superintendent because I've got someone at the end of their clock. Can you go and please to sit down outside so you can't have your prisoner? So, we're stacking up and we're stacking up. So me and the solicitor are just sat there not doing anything. And eventually when I do get to meet with a detained person, that they tell me about their mental health difficulties, and I'm asking them questions, finding out about their welfare.
Yes.
And when did you last when did you last see a doctor? What is your diagnosis? Well, I've got schizophrenia. When did you last see a doctor? Don't be stupid, mate. I can't get to see the doctor. Do you have a mental health nurse? Yes, I do. A community psychiatric nurse. When did you last see them? Oh, about 6 months ago. Well, I keep asking for an appointment, but I can't get an appointment with them. And do you go to A&E? And
my fascination with the role that the media plays in all of this. Huge shortage of doctors, overworked. Many of them are utterly broken morale-wise, moving on to part-time hours. Daily Mail will attack doctors, not the politicians that they have been championing for the last 12 years. 12 years they've had to address these problems. And when things go wrong, it's all the fault of the foot soldiers.
Yeah, and it's, again, when I get a young person in, I had a young person in the other day, 14-year-old stole mum's car. Mum's a carer, as you talk about. So, carers, a bottom of the pile, being paid less than shop workers. So mum's so tired she's gone to bed early. 14-year-old son has taken a car. He's in custody because he's crashed it. And, okay, fine, what are we going to do with this young person? I asked, do you go to school? Yeah. No, I'm excluded from school. Why are you excluded from school? Because of my behaviour. Right, well, which other school do you go to? You must go to another school. Oh, no, I don't go to school.
Don't go. So, I mean, there is no system. There is no society for someone like him. Obviously, some people listening will think he's an architect of his own misfortunes. But what do? Wash our hands, walk away, pretend these people don't exist until they pop up doing things that force us to notice them, doing things that are terrible. I'm delighted to tell you that Scott Benton, the MP for Blackpool, not too far from where Dave is calling from, he's very clear about what the top priorities are for this government. He's published a picture of some people on one of those death trap dinghies And he's written that stopping this has to be a top priority for the incoming Prime Minister. Do whatever it takes. Enough is enough. My constituents are sick and tired of seeing these images. No ifs, no buts. We must find a way to stop this embarrassing farce. So if you're wondering why the dinghy story is coming back into the news at a rate of knots at the moment, the answer's pretty simple. It lies in what every contributor to this programme is describing about the reality of their own existence. What the hell are we going to do if we've spent 12 years actually championing these politicians and these policies? And it's led us to this. We're going to have to find a massive distraction. Look, over there, some dinghies. And, of course, they need the dinghies. I explained this to you yesterday. They don't want this crisis to be solved. How the hell are they going to distract you from the cost of living crisis if there aren't any desperate people in dinghies to point at and encourage you to hate? It's all so simple, isn't it? Dave, thank you. Adam's in Victoria. Adam, what would you like to say?
I don't know where to start. I was better off as a pizza delivery driver 6 years ago than I am now as an AV engineer. So I install like aerials and satellites. So basically, I was delivering pizzas for about 5 years while I was training with my dad, because you need 5 years experience to work as an AV engineer in this particular company. He's been in the trade for 20 years. And he says things have never been so bad. So now I've been doing it for 3 years. So, once I gave up the pizza job, I started as an AV engineer. Within year one, I was on about £80,000. But because I'm self-employed and I subcontract from a large company, I basically go into people's houses that basically their TV's not working, and I quote them for repairs. But it's up to them to say yes, they want to go ahead with the repairs.
So you're doing sales as well as sales plus engineering, really?
Yeah, pretty much. But what I find now is obviously first year about 80k, second year 100k.
Wow.
And that's when I employed my best friend. I started to train him up.
Okay.
And then third year, about 120k with obviously the extra person. I was paying him quite well.
Yeah.
And what happened is after the second year, after obviously COVID happened, my van broke down during the end of COVID. I've always been a person that's been good with money. Okay. I lost out on a month of income because my van was in repair.
Yeah.
Then I caught COVID. I lost another month of work because I was really, really ill. The second month I went in, I wasn't performing as well because I was getting dizzy spells on top of roofs.
Yeah, not good. Not a good working. You'd be all right on the radio, but not on a roof.
Absolutely. and then obviously now the war in Ukraine. So basically, after COVID and obviously the war in Ukraine and the price of living hike, I had to let go of my best friend.
Oh, that's tough.
He took that quite personally. I had to let go of my flat because I couldn't afford rent anymore.
Oh boy.
Then my van got broken into. They took £4,000 worth of stuff. I had to eat into that. So now, basically, it's got to the point where I'm driving my van around on eco mode just because petrol prices are so high. I'm skipping meals. I had to let my flat go. I'm living, with my mum.
Yeah.
Half time with my girlfriend.
And it's very simply because people haven't got the money to pay for the stuff that you provide.
Literally. So I used to go into about 10 households a day, about 10 jobs a day. That's dropped down to 4. I go into council estates. I also go into all walks of life, also go into like penthouses and Baker Streets. And it's literally the same across everywhere. Like, for example, a guy I had last week, I quoted him £300 for an aerial install and cabling, etc. And he says, no, I'm going to get more quotes. It's simply too expensive. He told me his service charge for the penthouse went up from $12,000 a year up to $24,000. So even though from the outside, I would think he's really rich, he's got lots of money, he's got assets. Really, everyone is struggling.
I know exactly what you mean by that. It's a hard theory to sell sometimes, as you say, penthouses and the trappings of enormous wealth. But it is about income versus outgoings, as everybody understands. And yes, some people will find it easier to trim their outgoings, but only so far, as Adam just explained. Otherwise, you're looking at the big stuff, like literally letting people go from your workforce, or letting your letting your accommodation go. It's 11:17. 19 minutes after 11 is the time. I mean, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek when I say, where is it going well? Who can look back at the last 12 years of Conservative government and think, yeah, that's good. And some of us may have had our personal conditions improve. You may have been on a roll at work. You may have got lucky in the property market. Everybody who's got a property essentially is, in a sense, lucky in the property market over that period. So it's not This is the thing I turn my attention to next, not today, but just in the terms of the bigger picture of our time together every day. This idea of people who aren't feeling the urgency that many of my callers are communicating are not bad people. You just, the sum of our own experiences is the sum of our own experiences. And so there'll be lots of people who are the polar opposite of our last caller, who are self-employed and who have had a really good 12 years. But as everybody has less money to spend, inevitably, because the cost of everything is going up by so much. Remember the 18% warning on inflation, one of the forecasts. So it is simply the case that I guess the people who are still in business, even though the prices have gone up by so much, so some of them are going to be okay. But everybody is going to be paying more for less, and that's going to have impacts everywhere. And that's just on a domestic level. I look at the stories in the news every day, and I see the sectors, and I see them all creaking at the seams, or indeed screaming in frustration. And I don't quite know how to handle it, professionally speaking. And that this is a theme. We've been on it for an hour and 20 minutes. It's a theme to which we're going to have to return. But together we're going to have to come up with ways of doing it that are not too dispiriting, okay? Annette says, I know Starmer is not as visible as you or I would want, and I understand you highlighting Sharon Graham's lazy criticism of him, but it's not gone unnoticed that Mick Lynch last week on your show did say that Keir Starmer was a good man and that he would like a Labour government, even led by Starmer, and he admitted they would work well together on the P&O dispute. So please, let's hear some positive critiques. They can be found, even if the right-wing press chooses to ignore them. In my defence, Annette, you heard those positive critiques on this programme, so you can hardly in the same breath accuse me of not highlighting them or broadcasting them. And Lynch is every inch a pragmatist. It's very odd for an ideologue. In fact, during that interview, I don't know if you heard it on Friday, he was very much at his best when doing the pragmatism, the compromise, the meeting halfway, and dare I say very much at his worst when doing the ideology, which only really kicked in when he was attempting somewhat unsuccessfully to justify his support at the time for Brexit. 22 minutes after 11 is the time. Ethan is in Amesbury. Ethan, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello,
so
mate.
Me and my girlfriend are both 25 and we are both primary school teachers in the same school. So she's going into her third year, I'm going into my second. And we are, over the summer, we've been looking very realistically at what to do instead of this.
Right.
So we both absolutely love the job, the idea of the job. But we're expecting a baby in February, our first child. So
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So our time and our money is going to get stretched further than it is already. And we're now at this kind of crossroads where we've kind of become disenfranchised with the whole thing.
Why?
Because we have class sizes that are too big to the extent where my classroom right now still isn't in a working condition because I have no idea how to get my tables in a formation that works.
Yeah.
And that's just because the more kids you have, the more money you have.
Of course.
So it's not ideal for teachers. Our holidays that people assume are nice and relaxing and we get all these holidays, especially for younger teachers, we spend all those holidays either in the classroom setting up displays or planning for next term or stressing about what's coming and all of these things. And we're kind of at the point where we're looking at how do other countries do it? Can we go to Scandinavia where their whole approach is completely different? How can we avoid becoming one of those statistics about people leaving within 5 years? Because the line of traction is that we're probably going to end up that way, which is quite...
From the teaching profession, as with the medical profession, and as we have learnt this week, or some of us have learnt this week, some are across it before, with the legal profession as well, or the criminal justice end of the legal profession, people are just not going to put up with it.
Yeah, I mean, my mum is a district nurse and has been for 30 years, and my brother's a newly qualified paramedic. My uncle's a paramedic. I've got lots of NHS people in my family. So it's kind of we've got my perspective on teaching. We've got everyone else in my family's perspective on the NHS. And it's all a bit much, really.
I understand. I mean, how deep have you dug into the plausibility of actually hitting the road? Is it? I mean, because 25 is an interesting age. 25 years old, first baby on the way. These are monumental decisions that you take, aren't they?
We've looked at. We've studied a lot into like Finland and Norway and things. Their schools are set up to, instead of being places of kind of education, like we have a knowledge-based curriculum. So I'm teaching, when I go in, I'm teaching about the Mayans. And I'm sat here as a 25-year-old, not one of those old school traditionalists, kind of thinking, well, how is this going to help them? I'm teaching them fluff because I'm told to, instead of the stuff that I'm passionate about. Whereas... I mean, to be fair, you could be passionate about the Mayans, and that would rather undermine your argument. I could try.
I understand. Whereas in the Scandinavian model is a much more holistic approach to just improving rather than instructing and educate. As you will know, originally the Latin means to lead out, not to pour in. I think that instruction is something else Michael Gove bears a lot of responsibility for as he moves away from frontline politics and slides back onto Rupert Murdoch's payroll. I can't get past that at the moment. It just seems to me to be so emblematic of so much of what we talk about. As you're looking at the 12-year span of Conservative government, one of the most key figures in all of them is Michael Gove, and just washing his hands of it all. Well, yeah, I've set fire to the country, but I'm off now. I'm off to work for the bloke I was working for before I set fire to the country. And everyone just goes along with it, especially in my game. You know, I'm going to stop getting invited to places soon, because you can't keep pointing at it. There are loads and loads of good people on all of the newspapers that I slag off every single day. But there comes a point where you've got to call them. We've got to just say that's not right. How can you move from being a Rupert Murdoch columnist to bringing Boris Johnson, Brexit, and Dominic Cummings into the very forefront of British politics, and then when the consequences of those idiotic decisions, those despicable decisions, become clear, you announce that, I've had enough now. I'm going back to being a newspaper columnist. And people like Ethan are looking at the whole life ahead of them and thinking, I don't like the idea of making it in this country anymore. That's been done to the country by politicians and by events, some of which were unforeseeable, some of which weren't. Brian's in Lincoln. Brian, what would you like to say?
I wish you hadn't mentioned Michael Gove, the worst education secretary we ever had.
Well, yeah, but you're probably a teacher. What do you know about the education section?
Well, I'm a head teacher in a primary school, a local authority primary school. I'd say it was about medium-sized, about 250 pupils.
Right.
Deprived area, about 40% free school meals. Now, I conservatively estimate that I've got to, this coming year, find an extra £40,000 to cover the increased, the pay increase for teachers, first of all, which we are not getting extra money for, and also the energy bills. So we've got considerable amounts of electronic devices within school, and
got to keep it warm, most obviously, haven't you? That's the.
Well, yeah, keep it warm, but also it's all of the equipment, the digital equipment we've got, which we're expected to have, which enhances teaching and learning. But I'd put some money aside to pay for a new heating system because ours is on its last knees.
And this is, I know it's your daily experience. I don't think many people realise that this all falls under the head teacher's remit these days. The idea that you are juggling budgets, thinking about buying new heating systems, it's probably not what you had in mind when you were doing your teacher training.
No, it's not. And the thing is as well, we're now making as head teacher decisions when we recruit. We are looking at not the best candidate, we're looking at the cheapest candidate. And that's the decision-making process now, because there's a massive difference between a newly qualified teacher, an early career teacher they're called now, and an experienced teacher.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, of course.
So the only people that are going to suffer, James, are the pupils.
The children, of course. Of course they are.
And that's the real worry. But I'm also worried about my staff, because they've got to pay for the increased bills, my parents.
To be clear, the government have announced a pay increase without offering any explanation of how you were supposed to fund it. Have I got that right?
Correct. Correct.
I mean, this is through the looking glass stuff, isn't it? What's the calculation? People like you have got so much money sloshing around. You're probably spending it all on avocado pears, aren't you? All those kids. 40% of your pupils are on free school meals. You've got to find the money to pay for a new heating system. Your energy bills, I don't know whether you've seen your forecast on what's going to happen to your energy bills or whether you're on a fixed rate. This is all on your remit as well. This is all on your desk as well. Your energy bills are not capped, so they could go nuclear, if you pardon the pun, in the next 12 months. And the teachers who desperately need a pay increase, I don't think many people would argue with that outside of Rupert Murdoch Daily Mail circles, but they're not giving you any money to pay for it.
No, we're expected to find it from the existing budgets. And as your last caller said, our budget is based on the number of pupils that we have. That goes up and down because there are people moving in and out of the area all the time. It's very transient. So our numbers are quite fluid. So it's very difficult to budget for that. And on top of that, we're expected to provide a decent level of education with Ofsted breathing down the necks as well.
And you're doing it now with teacher candidates that you'd rather not. There were better candidates for those jobs, but you're looking at the pay packet and not at the experience or the qualifications. I'll read you another one while you're here. In relation to your teacher that you've just had on, I'm a teacher of 11 years. I work in a very disadvantaged place in the UK. I'm currently going through the visa process for Australia. That's from Jem, who's in Liverpool. What do you have a breaking point? I hate asking these questions, but as I've explained a few times this morning, I think I have to some days. Do you have a breaking point? Do you have an up with this, I will not put point?
I think I've reached it a couple of times since we've had COVID and everything. I've muddled through. Just muddle through. That's all you can do. If I could do something, I'm 50. If I could do something else, I'd walk away, which really hurts me. Like your last caller said, but I don't do this job for the pay. I do it because I want to make a difference. I know that sounds really corny.
No, it doesn't.
But that's the reality. That's why teachers do it. It's a very hard job. People think it's easy. Some people think it's easy, but it's a very hard job. And I think head teachers who are nearing retirement will accelerate that process. So you'll be left with basically a vacuum.
The part of the reason why we have these conversations, even if they are upsetting, is to discover things and to learn new things. And that the word exodus is now popping up in all of these sectors, isn't it? Eventually, because I was struck by that 40% figure for the most junior criminal barristers, and then we've spoken to teachers, and then we get to the top of the tree to the head teachers. And you think they can't put up with this indefinitely. And as Brian has said, if I could do anything else, you've been a teacher for 30 years or 25 years. But anyway, the good news is that Liz Truss is perfectly happy to press the nuclear button. She announced perfectly prepared. How would you feel if you had to press a nuclear button? I think there's one answer to that, isn't there? Absolutely effing terrified. But no, not if you're Liz Truss. It is 11:32. Dominic Ellis is here with your headlines. Okay, so we'll stay with this till 12. I'm not quite sure what we will do after 12. I told you yesterday I'm keen to return to the question of Ukrainian refugees and what's going to happen when that 6-month window expires. The situation in Wales is pretty dire, I was reading this morning, because the Welsh government, I think admirably, didn't wait for refugees coming to the country to hook up with hosts themselves. So the government stepped in and opened the door, as it were, to people before they'd done the paperwork. We heard some terrible stories about people being stuck in limbo waiting to get permission to come here. So I'm not laughing about that. I'm laughing about the reaction I get every time I say avocado pear. It must be my age, right? Is it just, they're not pears, are they? But we called them pears when I was a kid. We always called them avocado, didn't we? I didn't imagine.
Có người lặng lẽ ngồi buồn, biển chiều hoang vắng